Today, we're talking about adjusting our sails, Tillamook's business resilience and community engagement with two CMC alumni, Trevor Beltz, class of 12, he's the manager of government relations and public affairs, and Jack Mulder, class of 96, director of engineering. Thank you both for taking the time to be with us today. We're very excited to learn about Tillamook and about its business resilience over the last year. So I'll hand it off to you two. Welcome and thank you.
All right, thanks, Evan.
We're going to jump right in, and then we will circle back for intros if that works well for everybody. Give me a second here. All right. So just some context. Tillamook, the Tillamook County Creamery Association is a 111-year-old farmer-owned and farmer-led cooperative. We have 80 plus members that are located all in Tillamook County, Oregon. As you can see in the map, it's a coastal region in Northwest Oregon. And we have a manufacturing facility in Tillamook, a manufacturing facility in Boardman, and offices in Tillamook headquarters and in Portland, along with 13 co-manufacturing sites located around the country.
We have nearly 1,000 employees and close to $1 billion in revenue. So, a good size organization, a bit larger than when I joined 21 years ago. So I want to take you back to March, and in early March, we had 9 new reported COVID cases, bringing the state total to 30 across 11 of Oregon's 36 counties. The governor had recently restricted large gatherings to 250 people. On Thursday, March 12th, our CEO announced that the next day, Friday, we should just work from home and work as a trial of our data systems. On Sunday, March 14th, a couple of days after the trial, we announced that the trial was successful. The data systems worked. We were able to handle a couple hundred people working from home. And we were just going to stay home for the next couple of weeks, continuing to work from home and kind of figure things out from there. That was 1 week before Oregon schools started spring break. And at the same time, we had a statewide order to begin spring break a week early. So we all ended up home with our kids, those of us that have kids, that next week, and then through spring break, not knowing where things went.
And
Trevor?
Yeah, so those next few weeks, like with everybody, I imagine, a similar situation turned into the next 8 months. And in that time, at Tillamook and collectively as a nation and a state, we've seen significant business shifts. We had an outbreak at our Boardman facility. We've overcome new technology challenges, had to reinvent the way that we work. Employees at all levels are dealing with stress from concerns about the virus, job security, family and school challenges with childcare and school going virtual, and obviously the social isolation of just not being able to meet and be together. That coupled with the other external events that have been ongoing throughout 2020 with social unrest, wildfires had ravaged Oregon, and there was one in the Tillamook area, divisive political year. So, everything that 2020 has had to offer. And despite all that, we are seeing some really exceptional business results and a strengthened organization overall. So the question we want to answer is how we got here. Jack, you want to lead us off?
Sure. So Jack Mulder, class of 96. I was a management engineering graduate of Claremont McKenna and industrial engineering graduate of Stanford. People ask me what I do. I tell them I don't make cheese, I make cheese factories. The reality is that we're really a service provider to our manufacturing and other operations, and we provide much of the infrastructure that we rely on to make and distribute our products, both branded, the cheese and ice cream and other products that you're probably aware of, and non-branded products like whey powders that are byproducts of the cheese making process. My team builds plants, programs plants, maintains the facilities, and then we're responsible for environmental compliance and energy and water management. So it works well with my educational background and my interest in environmental issues and broader energy issues.
And I'm Trevor Beltz, class of 12, and I'm our manager of government relations and public affairs. I listed this Venn diagram for you because I think it's helpful to understand the core tenets of our government relations strategy, which is enhance the cooperative, enrich our communities, and advance Oregon. So with all of that in mind, my job is to track and engage, monitor legislation and regulation, kind of anything under the sun that could be impactful to Tillamook. And that's a pretty wide spectrum of issues, from tax, liability, labor, obviously on-farm stuff, manufacturing. So it's paying attention to a lot of different things that are happening in a lot of different levels of government. Work on coalition building, working with our trade association partners, Food Northwest, which is a food manufacturing trade association in the Northwest region, Oregon Business and Industry, Oregon Dairy Farmers Association, and then folks on the national level like National Milk and International Dairy Foods Association. So I work with all of those to leverage relationships. And I think, as something that I had read as government affairs is proliferating goodwill to consistently maintain and build up a bank of a positive reputation or political capital. So it's, providing the right information to the right levels of government to make sure that there's open communication and that we can make an ask or a request at the right time, and that we've built up that relationship with policymakers. A little bit about my team, just kind of understand where government relations sits. Stewardship is our department, and within stewardship is corporate communication, environment, and community impact, our farm services team, and government affairs. And so what we all use as our lens and how we represent and work towards or for Tillamook is to represent and advocate on behalf of our 6 stakeholders, which are thriving farms, healthful cows, inspired consumers, enduring ecosystems, fulfilled employees, and enriched communities. So
Trevor and I have gotten to know each other partly because of the CMC connection, and also because, in addition to my work at Tillamook, I'm an elected official in Tillamook with one of the local port districts, and I'm the vice chair this year, moving into the chair role of Food Northwest, one of our industry trade groups. So it's been fun to have another CMC graduate in the company, and somebody that brings the skill sets that Trevor brings to us. It's been great.
Yeah, I came on in January, and I'm based in our Portland office, and Jack's based in our plant office in Tillamook. And so we all have an onboarding where we go out to Tillamook to see what's going on within our plant and kind of learn the ins and outs of what the corporate culture is at our headquarters. And Jack was kind enough to meet with me over lunch. I mean, I think we spent an hour and a half just talking and got a tour of the whole plant, and really got a hands-on experience of what I was supposed to be representing right off the bat.
So we wanted to start our discussion about how we've responded with our values. And all of our operations and really everything that we do are grounded in the values that we've committed to as a company. These values are, as listed here, one team. We work together as a team to solve problems. We keep our commitments to each other. We genuinely care about our people. We put our people first. We care about health and safety. We're committed to uncompromising quality in our products. We're good stewards of the environment and of our communities that we operate in. And we play to win. So, we're not doing all of these things just to get by. We do want to be successful. We're committed to success. And at the same time, we cover our important obligations first, and finances come after we cover our important obligations and through covering our important obligations. Bringing these values in as a foundation, we then have built over the last 5 or 6 years a number of ways to bring people together. So we have a program that all new managers and above go through. And this is something that managers, directors, VPs, and executives go through to have a common set of tools and ways of solving problems. It's put on by a company called Veris. It's their Pathways program. And it gives us a common language. It gives us a common way to interact, and it builds bridges across silos in the organization. So when things happen, we know the people that are doing things, and we're not second guessing each other as decisions are being made. We also have an insights program which builds additional management and leadership skills. And our people and culture team, which is what we used to call this human resources, as many do, but it's really focused both on people and on the underlying culture. It's rooted in encouraging collaboration and communication between teams and departments and company. And we're methodical about this and committed to it as a way of making Tillamook a great place to work and bringing great people in. And then once we're grounded in the same values and the same ways of working, we have more freedom to make decisions and do the things that we need to do to move the business forward.
On top of our core company values, our executive leadership team also put together COVID principles to guide us as a whole and our leadership through this pandemic. So I wanted to just read those through, and we've got a couple talking points beyond those. I think first, there's been a real effort to roll decision-making down to the appropriate levels, to put decision-making in the hands of, the people doing the work that needs to be making those decisions. Something that my boss tells me all the time is, Trevor, I didn't hire you to tell you what to do. I hired you to tell me what to do. So there's really an effort to want to rely on the help and the value of employees that we work so hard to find. So going through the values or the leadership principles, we will make decisions consistent with our values. As always, we will prioritize the health and safety of our employees, our farmers, and our communities. And we will support our employees, protecting them as best we can from the negative financial impacts of the situation. Jack, do you have an example on this one?
Yeah, so one example of this is our food service business. So an area that we haven't been particularly strong in is food service. You may see us on the menu in certain restaurants, but it's been something that really has been more demand driven rather than us pushing it. And we decided a couple of years ago that's an area that we wanted to move more deeply into, and we began building a team to do that. The team was just coming together as we entered the COVID shutdowns, and the food service business basically evaporated. Prior to COVID, we were approaching 50% of the food sold in the US was sold through restaurants rather than through grocery stores. And that percentage has been growing over time. 50% of the food sold through restaurants is the highest it's ever been. And that changed significantly overnight. That food service team, a group of people that comes at substantial cost to the company and had just been hired, were very concerned about losing their jobs. And we actually committed to keeping the entire team on and pivoting their work, rethinking their work, and giving them this opportunity when food service sales are significantly down, a chance without maybe the day-to-day workload to focus more on strategy for the future and what they're going to do. And we've seen that commitment to employees across the business. But that is a great example of how we will support our employees and protect them through this pandemic.
The last couple to just round off these COVID principles is we will be generous and proportional in our support of our communities and other stakeholders. And we'll get into a bit of some support that we've provided communities. We will continue to pursue our growth strategy, keep the cooperative strong, optimize profits, invest in our business, and support our farmers financially. We feel good about doing well. However, we will not take advantage of consumers, customers, partners, or farmers in this situation. So that's where we're coming from. And now we want to pivot a little bit to what it's been like on the ground and how we've used collaboration to help get the cross-departmental functions through this pandemic.
So consistent with our goal of moving more decision-making to appropriate levels, and that generally means less decision-making at the top and more people empowered to make decisions in the organization. We saw several areas start making preparations for COVID even in January and February, kind of looking at what they were seeing around them, anticipating what would happen. And we began to see preparations. But also early on, we established a business resilience team. This is a cross-functional group to bring decision-making, to bring information into a central area and provide central coordination where it's needed. This helped us with kicking off work from home, establishing clear communication about that. We really did that with a lot of trust in our employees. I remember driving down to the plant office, which is only a couple of miles away from home, backing my car up to basically to the front door, and then wheeling out my computer, my monitors, my docking station, my chair, and bringing home the things that I needed, on a Sunday afternoon, because I needed to be working from home efficiently. And frankly, I can't do that on a 15-inch laptop screen. So we have seen this all over the place, establishing $250 per employee to go buy what you need to buy to work from home efficiently. We really focused on communication. So prior to COVID, we've had biannual meetings in person twice a year. So our CEO and various others will come to the various sites. And in a site like Tillamook with 500 employees and widely diverse operations across 3 shifts, we would have 5 or 6 different sessions over the course of the day, bringing in 75 to 100 people per session to talk with them about the year and business results and where we're going and what we're seeing in the markets. And this would happen every January and every July. As we transitioned to working from home, we began weekly roundtables. So our CEO would speak weekly, and it's now more like monthly, about what we're seeing, what decisions we're making, what we're seeing on the sales front, how we're reacting to state rules that have been enforced. And really also, I think one of the most powerful parts was acknowledging the difficulties for the people who have transitioned to working from home. Our manufacturing sites require people to work in the plants. So they have their own difficulties and their own anxieties as people are working in the plants, figuring out ways to eat lunch without being crowded in the lunchroom, wearing masks all day long in a manufacturing setting. One day our CEO showed up with a COVID haircut and told us he was glad that we were only seeing the front of his head because, whichever child had cut his hair forgot the comb on the back, right? So acknowledging that burden that, that we were all facing in different ways. And the technology transition that we've had, we use Microsoft Teams mostly, but I think like many of us, whether it's Teams or Zoom or whatever the tool is, we pivot and adjust. But getting that nailed down, getting used to that. And I think the technology has enabled that communication so that, we don't have to set up a big all-day event where people are traveling across the state to have these meetings. We can pull together a 30-minute update on a more regular basis and feel like we're together and aligned from the top level. I think it's also that process with Patrick, our CEO, and with each other it's set the culture that it's okay to be informal and have a work from home life. So Trevor and I were talking yesterday in preparation for this, and my 7-year-old came in and crawled in my lap and just wanted to be here. And that's what we're dealing with in working from home. So it's been, I think that cultural piece has been an enabler for the rest of the workforce, acknowledging the difficulties, providing support, and looking out for people, because people are what's driving our business.
One other thing on just kind of the internal coordination is, it's one thing to get everybody in an understanding on the manufacturing side, but we do have people that have to go into our main offices, our actually office work for research and development, pick stuff up, drop stuff off, and it was very taxing to kind of figure out how to manage capacity and ensure everybody's safety. So we, as part of the BRT, had also coordinated to work on office reentry and kind of, as many other businesses are trying to figure out, how much do we really need to go into the office? How much can be virtual? What do we need this for? And so through the BRT and through other groups, we had worked to come up with a reservation system, and are constantly maintaining updated regulations and guidelines that the state's putting out that we have to follow. So that's been another piece, is making sure that we're supporting those employees when they really need it, but it's building up that trust that Jack was talking about, to make sure that we trust them, that they're not going to abuse the system and put them and our other employees' health and safety at risk, but to make sure that we're providing access to those who have tough work from home situations, or don't have the right internet access, or need an office space to do their job. Moving on to the external side of this, I think it's important to note how much luck has played a role, to an extent, at least early on in the pandemic. We saw other food manufacturing companies and facilities in Oregon early in the pandemic have pretty major outbreaks. And I think we count ourselves really lucky that we were able to escape those big outbreaks, but B, learn from those and kind of figure out, okay, what are the steps that we need to put in place to make sure that we have safety in mind, that we're looking at the right issues with regard to this pandemic. And so what that really came down to is taking a proactive approach with our external partners. So making sure that we had our quality team put together an enhanced operations plan and drafted that up. And that would be, what we would go into when or if there's an outbreak scenario in our manufacturing setting, but it also looks at safety and components for the office setting as well. But building that relationship directly with local county public health officials really built a relationship early on with them, and kind of put it in their court to say, listen, we want to work with you. We don't want you to crack down on us and come tell us what's wrong. We want to work with you and make sure that we're solving the issues up front, as opposed to when it's too late. And I think that was really important, planning ahead and getting our feet grounded underneath and what we stood for, as opposed to what we had to do from what others would force on us. And I think that's a good jumping off point to kind of quickly go into what happened in our Boardman outbreak and kind of the resilient story of how we came through that. This is where Jack jumps in.
Jack, you are muted.
There we go. I was moving my chair around. That partnership with the counties we operate in and the state has benefited us. Food Northwest, which is an industry association here in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, was also proactive through this time, helping respond to these manufacturers that had their own outbreaks prior to Tillamook. But collaborating with those manufacturers, with us, and gathering best practices together and sharing them. I think, we all sort of know what we know now, but it's easy to forget how little we knew back in March, April, and May. And we were all learning as we went. As Trevor noted, we were lucky. We were even lucky in our first case in Boardman, which was April 1st. It was an individual who had been on PTO, unpaid time off. He got sick. He got tested. He hadn't been in the plant for 5 or 6 days. And so we had minimal risk in the plant. And our second case wasn't until June 16th. Now, while our Tillamook site just had its first case over the weekend, and Tillamook County is really a bright spot as far as this disease progression has gone in the state and nationally. Morrow County and the adjacent Umatilla County, where our Boardman plant operates, has been a hot spot in the state. So we received our second case on June 16th. By July 28th, we had 26 cases, and we're now up to approximately 50 cases in the plant, which is between 20 and 25% of the workforce. So, you know, we've had a substantial number of employees. At one time, we were worried that we were going to have to shut down, and that's difficult because dairy cows do not stop producing milk. One of the things that was drilled into me when I first started was the milk always keeps flowing. It doesn't matter what other priorities we have. If something's broken down or, you know, people are sick, the milk has to keep flowing. So we were making contingency plans like vice presidents operating production lines because we might have to go there. We never did have to go there, although we did move some people between sites. And through proactive testing and contact tracing, we've actually established that we believe all of the cases in that Boardman plant were spread outside the plant. So this is not spread that happened within the plant. It's social events and other things in the community. Transparency with the county health department led them to comment that we were a model of how to manage COVID response within a manufacturing facility. And after going through the peak of the outbreak there in June and July, we had, you know, a couple more cases here and there, and reached out to the county health department, informed them proactively of the cases, and they were a little bit surprised to see that rather than getting it through official channels days later. It really reinforced their confidence in us and the partnership with you know, with these entities that could otherwise have come in and made things more difficult for us.
So, you know, it's really been a lot of coordinating and making sure that we maintain the right level of communication with the right levels of government and other groups that are in our similar sphere. So, you know, as Jack is on the board at Food Northwest, and they have really been integral to getting us information and us sharing information on what we've been working on, but to disseminate to make sure that other food manufacturing facilities understand and have access to the work that we've been doing, but, you know, to play off each other as well. But, you know, is like Jack said, we were all kind of trying to figure out which foot to put forward and how the pandemic was impacting us at which level. So maintaining those conversations with business groups and our ag partners was really crucial, especially because there was so much information, but kind of lack of direction of what was coming through from the counties as well as the state and nationally from, you know, CDC. It seems like everything was changing every single day and we had to kind of shift gears. So, you know, we've maintained a pretty open communication with our Tillamook County leaders, our state legislative elected officials, and those county public health officials. And I think that that's really led us to be relied upon for when we do have issues, we can bring them to those individuals and say, you know, listen, we've got this going on and we need some help, or they rely on us for help and direction. And we've been able to utilize our facilities in Tillamook as jumping off points for support for the communities as well. So during our wildfire, we were able to use our Tillamook facility as a food staging ground to give out resources to have people stay there as they kind of collected themselves as they were displaced by fires. Going to, oh, that's one too many. Did I miss? We'll go back. So the response of all of this, I think it's helpful to understand, or actually I probably skipped too many. As I mentioned, the visitor center that we have in Tillamook, the response has been really great. We've really felt supported by our community and the folks that venture out to that facility. I think it's worth noting that our visitor center is the second biggest tourist attraction in Oregon, next to Multnomah Falls. And so it's been a balancing act through the pandemic to make sure that we are leading with health and safety in mind with those plans in place, because being a tourist draw, we wanted to make sure that we weren't driving economic support or tourism to the rest of the county in the area before county local health, county public health was available, before other businesses had their COVID plans set up. And so it was kind of a give and take, making sure that we were in constant communication with the Chamber of Commerce and other businesses to make sure, and the county officials to make sure that everybody was ready for when we kind of would bring those additional folks to the area. And I know
that
that
the visitor center shutdown is a really great example of the values leading from up front. So we just opened a new visitor center, $25 million investment 2 years ago. We see about 1.5 million visitors a year through that building. And we made the decision in March to shut down just as we entered our peak season. And it's, you know, with that many people in a retail establishment, it's a significant contributor to profitability. It employs upwards of 250 people in the summer with a bunch of students and temporary staff. In the winter, the lower season, we're more around 75. We kept all of those people on board. We put them to work in the plant or in volunteer opportunities, making masks. We had sewing machines set up on all the tables, making masks for the community. So it's been while it has reopened and we figured out creative ways to allow people in and stay within limits, it's been a real interesting summer for that business. And I think it's really contributed to the limited spread of COVID in the community. Had it been open, drawing in those 1.5 million people, or even a substantial portion of that, I think we would have seen a different result here in Tillamook County. Another business shift that we've seen is, you know, I mentioned earlier, food service to grocery. So while the food service team has been rethinking their strategy, the grocery business really took off. And some of that was stocking up early on. I think we're all familiar with the toilet paper woes. People tended to stock up on cheese and ice cream as well. If you're not familiar with it, if you buy our extra sharp cheese and put it in the back of your fridge, you truly can take it out 15 years later and still eat it. And it's quite good. So we saw that back in March and April. And as we've been expanding this year, one of our big expansion areas has been the Southeast and the Mid-Atlantic states. We've seen people really enjoy our ice cream and our cheese, and the growth has happened much faster than expected. So in the midst of all of this, we've entered new markets. We've seen a great response to our products, and we've kept up with fulfillment rates above 90%. Normally, we would not be happy with 90%. We would be happier with 98 or 99%. But as we were seeing competitors hit 50% fulfillment rates in the second quarter of this year, we were able to maintain 90%. And that goes to a business where we're communicating with each other, where people were thinking ahead, planning ahead, looking for supply, alternative supplies where things might be disrupted, having safety stocks and inventories. And I think it really shows the benefits of building a strong collaborative culture and giving people the right tools to do their work. For those of you who work in a business like this, it's probably also worth noting that on November 1st last year, we went live with a new enterprise resource planning system. So in the midst of this, we started COVID and we were only 3 or 4 months into a new ERP, and we're still, things are working well, and the data systems are supporting a great year.
Back to we want to keep going back to the values, and we believe that being a values-based company has really allowed us to be successful, especially through this time. And so thinking of others as much as we think of ourselves internally, and going back to our COVID principle of making sure that we're proportional in our support of communities and other stakeholders, I wanted to run through real quick on what we've done as a response. I know I want to make sure that we've got time for questions, so I'll kind of just briefly run through this. So we want to make sure that we're giving support directly to Oregon. We set aside a good amount of money to support organizations that work on ag advocacy, food security, and healthful children. So this is going a lot to food banks and schools. We've worked together with chambers of commerce in Tillamook as well as in Boardman for resilience funds to support small community-based businesses and really be able to give individual grant dollars to help them weather the storm through the pandemic. We doubled our hours with, we pay employees to be able to volunteer for community or for issues that they care about. So making sure that we're empowering our employees to get out and build those relationships in the communities. We also donated quite a bit of money and food to the Oregon Food Bank. But something else I thought was really neat is we gave each employee, I think 20 some odd coupons that we were able to give out to community members, neighbors, frontline workers, delivery people, just to show, we're appreciative of the work they're doing, and we're thankful. I mean, we get to work from home, at least some of us, but others don't have that ability and have to be out there working every day. So to celebrate those who need celebrating. We also jump-started a program that was in additional to our original commitment, which is All for Farmers. And this is providing micro grants to farms across the country to be able to, through the American Farmland Trust. So in our 16 activated markets. So this is, helping individual farms through the plight of kind of American rural economies going down, to make sure that they're able to weather the pandemic and weather changing markets and battle climate change as they see fit. So like I said, I want to make sure that we get to questions here. So I'm happy to answer questions individually more on this. But as you can see, we have been, as we've been talking about, we did feel like we've done relatively well given the shift from food service to grocery. And so being proportional, we want to make sure that we're giving back to the communities and establishing ourselves as something that can be relied upon to make sure that we're instilling change and healing through the communities that we're involved in.
So Trevor, we do have a question I wanted to respond to in the chat. A question about retail sales going up year over year. Yes, and a lot of that is geographical. So we made a conscious effort to expand our sales in California. I think we were widely distributed in California 5-6 years ago, but we wanted to expand our market share and really solidify our position on the West Coast. And then we've been creeping south and east, entering additional markets in the West, more heavily into Arizona, Colorado, Salt Lake City, and into Texas. And then we've seen substantial growth in the Southeast over the last 18 months, 18 to 24 months as we've entered that market. So historically, we were, in cheese chunk sales as high as 50% market share in the Pacific Northwest. That's gone down a little bit as we've repositioned the brand, but geographically we're growing, and 50% market share in the north, in a small market like the Northwest, is maybe not as desirable as a lower percentage of market share in larger markets farther out.
A couple of questions came in, guys, about your manufacturing locations. I have someone here from Houston, loves I think it's your black cherry ice cream, and is curious, is that made in a local facility with Tillamook's recipe? Is that made in Oregon and shipped? What does your distribution look like for some of your products?
Do you want me to take that, Trevor?
Yeah, I was going to pull up our co-manufacturing site, see if I can figure that out.
Yep. So that ice cream is probably made in Arizona. We make ice cream in Oregon, Washington, and Arizona right now, and we're looking in Michigan, recently added. So our Tillamook plant makes about 1/3 of our ice cream right now, and about 1/3 of our cheese. Our Boardman plant makes about 2/3 of our cheese. There are a few flavors that we're not equipped to make in-house that are made, but the bulk of our pounds come from Tillamook and Boardman. Nearly all of our cheese from our two facilities. Ice cream is one where our plant just isn't set up to geographically to supply the whole country here on the edge of the continent. The other issue that we face, which is kind of interesting, if we try to ship ice cream from Tillamook, where our plant sits about 35 feet above sea level, to Salt Lake City or to Denver, the air that's in ice cream tends to blow the lid off the carton. So as the ice cream goes up and over the passes in the trucks, the air expands and it doesn't travel particularly well. So for the Intermountain states, we need to manufacture ice cream at a higher elevation.
And something new every day. I had no idea. Sherry is curious about your how COVID has affected your supply chain and your partners, like co-manufacturers and suppliers and other distribution partners. What have you seen, and how has it impacted Tillamook?
Well, so far there haven't been huge disruptions. Our procurement team has dealt with a lot of potential interruptions and worked to keep supplies flowing into our plants. We've seen some outbreaks in distribution warehouses of our customers. We've had to navigate around those as they've shut down and deep cleaned and kind of figured out how to respond. But so far, things have been, other than managing through issues like everyone has, things have been going pretty well with co-manufacturers and suppliers.
Trevor, did you want to walk through a supply chain map?
I can't pull it up without stopping the sharing. So let's keep the questions rolling, and I will we'll stop sharing the PowerPoint.
Great. Ada is curious about your training during the pandemic. Are you using Zoom? How are you onboarding new people? What does that look like? Ada, if you have any follow-up, please unmute and ask it yourself. Go ahead.
Jack may be able to answer it for the manufacturing setting. But that's still all in person. We have had a number of hires in the office setting, and that's all actually been virtual. We ship and send the right materials to the individuals who are starting up, or we'll have them go directly to the offices they'll be based out of to pick up stuff. We keep a pretty bare bones team in those offices, kind of just the front desk staff to be able to take stock and receive shipments and that sort of thing. But it's really been all mostly virtual. I know I had two members of my team that I hadn't met in person at all until we had a drive-through employee appreciation day. So it was really interesting to see somebody in person for the first time. But to my knowledge, the office side has been really great. I mean, we were able to, like so many other businesses, accelerate our technology and rollout of teams to make sure that we're all working more collaboratively at the same time.
In the plant, the training has to be hands-on. So when we need to do that, well, let's see, when we need to do that, we've got to get people working together on the floor. They're wearing masks. They're staying separated as much as possible. Some of our operations like cheese manufacturing and whey drying, we actually have, they're fairly automated, and so people are working far apart. So it's easier. On our cheese packaging lines, it's a little bit more challenging in a few positions where people are working close together. Anywhere where it's possible, like Trevor mentioned, we've gone online. So our safety trainings, which used to be a time when we'd bring 50 to 100 people into a room and train on basic safety topics every month. Those are all online now. Same with our food safety training. Many of these systems already existed. And so while people in the plant might take the training in a group setting, people in the office might tune in when they're able and watch online. So we've seen a big shift to doing as much as we can online, but there's still training that just has to be done hands-on in the plants. And that's been an interesting challenge for us because we do have several hundred people who can work from home, but we do have, then in the visitor center, we have people who have to be there to provide customer service to people coming in to visit. In our manufacturing facilities, we have a couple hundred, between 200 and 300 people in each manufacturing plant, making the product, testing the product in laboratories, performing maintenance, quality checks, all of the different support functions. So I think the key word has been flexibility. And staying committed to what we need to do, but giving people the tools to do it in the safest way possible through this.
We had a question come in, guys. What are your best sellers? What are the top Tillamook products? That's question one. Question two was, what changes have you seen in purchasing since the pandemic began? That would make.
Boy, I don't know that either of us are the best ones to
Yeah.
like right off the top of our head know those numbers.
Well, Jack, tell your story about vanilla anyway. I can't, like Jack said, you know, neither of us are on the sales team, and on our sales team, we manage it, what we call category managers. So it's each kind of siloed in the type of product, and that all comes up, and we really only see those numbers during our quarterly business review of kind of the overview of what's going on there. But I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but I think Jack might have at least a neat comment about how
I'll tell you about ice cream.
play off of each other.
So starting though with cheese, on the cheese side, you know, cheddar cheese is our #1 product. And I say cheddar, but it comes in yellow and it comes in white, and we can hold it longer and sell it as sharp, or even longer and sell it as extra sharp. Our biggest volume is by SKU is probably our 2-pound medium baby loaf. My favorite for every day is the sharp. So instead of being aged for 2.5 months, it's aged about 9 to 12 months, a little bit more flavor every day. And you know, those are basically made the same. It's the same cheese when it's made. If you put the block in the cooler for a year, it has a sharper taste at the end of the year than if you eat it 3 months in. On the ice cream side, surprisingly, our 3 vanillas are some of our top flavors. And, you know, people tend to have strong opinions about the vanillas. My stepfather is a huge fan of the French vanilla. I'm a huge fan of the vanilla bean. If he had his way, he'd never eat the vanilla bean, and I would never eat the French vanilla. And then we can come together and enjoy the old-fashioned vanilla because it's somewhere in between the two. But I think everyone has their own tastes, and it's fun to be able to offer different products for different people. Let me tell you a funny story about one of my wife's classmates from high school. So I grew up in Tillamook, and actually, you know, I've worked here at the company for 21 years. But one of her high school friends, while she was in college, she went and bought 2 cases of extra sharp white cheese. And so this is about 25 pounds of cheese, and she stuck it in the back of her fridge, and she said, "I'm holding these and I'm going to serve them at my wedding." She got married. So she got that cheese when she was about 20 years old. She got married when she was 38, and she served the cheese at her wedding, and it was delicious. So we have started recently marketing that extra sharp cheese differently. Before, we would package it as, say, 5-year-old cheese. So if we made cheese in 2012 and we intended to sell it in 2017, it would go into the cooler in a big block in 2012 after it's made. And in 2017, we'd take it out, cut it down, and put it in a package that says 5-year-old cheese. We found out that it actually is a lot more meaningful to people if we say, like wine, vintage 2012. And now you can choose, do I want 2012 cheese, or do I want to pay a little less and have 2014 cheese? And by the way, if you package it as 2012 in 2017 and then you don't sell it until 2018, people know it's 6-year-old cheese now. It's not 5-year-old cheese with an extra year of being in the package. So some fun things have come about as we've experimented with different ways of selling the cheese and telling that story.
You even have a 2012 vintage Oregon Pinot Noir with a 2012 vintage
There you go.
cheese. Good
We
idea.
have branded cheese boards to go along with that one.
Mm-hmm.
Sherry asked, do you plan to allow people to work from home in the future? And I'll kind of add a bit of a caveat before that with how do you think the pandemic will shape Tillamook once we go back to normal? And will you allow people to work from home?
So Trevor may not know this, but several years ago, we had flexibility in different areas of the company around working from home. And we basically put a strict limit on it and said, no, you can't do it. What we're seeing now is a significant change. I mean, we're obviously all working from home now, but we anticipate having a much larger degree of flexibility in the future, and all through the learnings of this pandemic.
I'm working on the team that's doing our office reentry. So we're looking at it in a phased approach, and we're not quite to the phase where we're able or willing to look at what return to the office really looks like until there's a vaccine and that it's been in production and circulation for X amount of time. But I do think that, to Jack's point, it will significantly change what our work from home practice is like. I think that it will be definitely increased. There will be a greater deal of flexibility. But back to our point quite a while back, is we want to make sure that we're empowering employees to make those decisions or to make decisions for their job. And so a lot of the flexibility that we've been working on through the pandemic is to make sure that managers of subordinates are having those conversations, frankly, with their employees and making situations work best for them and their team. I do think that there is a really positive culture that we all really want to embrace. And, there is something to be said for the water cooler chat. And I'm being relatively new to the company before COVID, that's something that I miss out on, not being able to kind of build my base of relationship with others in the company. And being as big as it is, it's really helpful to be able to walk over to somebody's desk as opposed to chat them or video call them at maybe an inopportune time. So whatever it looks like, I think that there will be greater flexibility, and it'll kind of likely come down to a decision by decision basis of what actually needs to happen in the office, or what's good for your team to just kind of build that community to meet together in person.
Great. We have time for one more question. If anybody wants to either put something into the chat or unmute yourself and ask it directly. Otherwise, we're gonna conclude and thank our 2 alumni. All right. We have one. On the East Coast, many cheese manufacturers had difficulty repackaging wholesale size to restaurants to retail size. Was this a problem for you? So I think that's a very, very interesting question.
Because our food service business was so small, this has not been a big problem for us. We were already heavily weighted toward consumer sizes. So, even though we saw business take off in those areas and we dealt with consuming supplies faster and working with our packaging suppliers to get us more packaging materials, instead of seeing maybe a doubling of production, if we were at 10% food service before and it went away, that means that 90% ate that up and then had a little bit more surge. We maybe saw a 20% increase in production, and we were able to absorb that and work through it. So I think we had fewer challenges than people who were more weighted toward food service. That was an issue in a lot of other areas of food manufacturing, even in the Northwest though. So I remember one situation early on where an egg supplier was dumping eggs because they simply didn't have a way to package them in dozen egg containers to go to the grocery store, and what they had been doing was breaking them and supplying egg mix, like pre-made scrambled egg mix. So we've been fortunate to not have that issue to the extent that others have had, but it's been a serious issue in the food industry.
Thanks. And we have Martin Kaplan, who raised his hand. We'll give Martin the last question.
Curious about management. In a company as large as yours is, I can imagine that you have to hire, professional outside managers, or do they come from the members?
So the managers are professional outside managers. The board, the 12, is it 12 or 9? 9 voted board members. There are 3 alternates who are non-voting, are owners of farms. They're owners of dairy farms who are members of the cooperative. There are additional board advisors who are non-voting members of the board who fully participate in deliberations and conversation, but the 9 voting members are farmer owners.
And I would add that, that you're absolutely right in a professional manager being very crucial, because as we've grown exponentially in the last couple of years, but as a brand overall, it's really important to make sure that we have training for those board members to make sure that they're understanding that the actions that they take, whether good or bad, have an implication for the overall brand reputation, what their environmental footprint looks like, and how that meshes with our environmental and stewardship plan. And so making them more mindful of the decisions that they make and how it impacts and the way we as a company work together with our farm owners.
I think building on that, Trevor, some of our board members today might have parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents who were board members before them. So, bringing them along on that journey is an effort. There's a program called Young Cooperators, which we have in place, and it's in common with other dairy cooperatives in the country. But it's a way of bringing people in their 20s as they're, maybe coming back onto the farm from school, or maybe they never left the farm in the first place, and engaging them in running their own business, and also preparing them to serve as a board member for this cooperative, which is a much bigger business.
As we conclude, it might be interesting to quickly share the size of these farms. You mentioned there's 80 farms in the co-op. Are they 500 cows, 1,000 cows? Are they the same size, different size? What does that look like?
No 2 farms are alike. We have everything from 50 cows to thousands. And I think a takeaway that you should think about is something that my boss likes to say, is that big dairies don't equal bad dairies, and small dairies don't equal good dairies. Is that dairies are all different. It's all compared to how management works. And the larger they are, the more acutely they have to follow environmental and impact protocols. So it's really an interesting management scenario for us to maintain communication. And we also provide farm services to each of these farms to make sure that we're checking milk bacteria and protein levels and somatic cell count, and working with them on their environmental footprint. So it's a juggling act to make sure that we're sizing accurately for the support that they need.
Great. Trevor, Jack, thank you both for taking the time today. We really appreciate it. To all of you, thanks for taking an hour out of your day and joining us. We hope to see you at next week's program. And once again, it is Giving Tuesday. If you haven't yet supported your favorite charity, please do so today. We, of course, hope CMC is one of those. Feel free to reach out at any time. Have a wonderful holiday season and have a great new year if we don't see you before January. So feel free to unmute, say thank you to our hosts.